so much for joining me for this week's vlog. Today, I want to read a few sections from my first book, My Last Step Backward. The topic today that I would like to cover from this book is what I like to call stuffing it. Stuffing it is actually a chapter title in my book and was something I did a lot after my accident. When I was in the hospital, I had many people coming to visit me, and I felt like I had to keep a happy face or put on a happy face for those people. I did not want to be depressing, and it really meant a lot that they had taken the time to come visit me. So I didn't want to share how I was really feeling. So I started stuffing it. This is where, instead of working out my emotions at the time of the initial feelings, I would repress my feelings and shove them down, block them out, so I didn't have to deal with them. And it worked at first. It actually helped at first. But the longer I was in the hospital, and the more I realized that my life was going to be drastically different, the less it was working for me and was not helping me at all. Here are a few sections from my book about stuffing it and the depression that I was fighting. We'll start on page 86. Stuffing it, I think Neil had called it. I was guilty of stuffing it so deeply, so far down that most people thought I was accepting my plight in the most graceful way. And quite frankly, some of my act was not an act. I felt genuine gratitude most of the time when I expressed it. Yet looking back, I agree with Neil that anyone faced with the change that comes from navigating the world via wheelchair will find stuffing it much easier than confronting it. And the perfect example of stuffing it is on page 97. It says, the longer I stayed in rehab, the clearer I saw the burden to my loved ones. They gradually lost their poker faces in a marathon round of 5-card draw. As pressures increased, stuffing it would inevitably lead to some sort of emotional meltdown. Yet the thing that triggered my first public outburst was as unpredictable as my fall back in November. On my way to physical therapy one day, I saw a woman in a wheelchair playing the piano in one of the rec rooms. She wasn't particularly gifted, but she had such dexterity in her hands. I stopped and watched in amazement, wondering if my fingers had moved that effortlessly across the keys. I paused long enough for the revelation to take hold. I looked down at my hands. 8 years of piano lessons. Suddenly a waste of time, a cruel joke. I would never play again. Why had it taken me so long to acknowledge? I had left another piece of old Tasha's shoe in that basement of the Sheldon Theater. Zooming down the hallway, I entered PT in tears. Without speaking, Neil hugged me. With no clue what had triggered this outburst, he comforted me, no questions asked. I raised my face from his soaked shirt enough to see others in the gym. As soon as I realized that people could see me crying, I dried up, stifled my sobbing, and let Neil wipe my face. I wanted to go back to stuffing it. With his best Fraser Crane look of, I'm listening, Neil never insisted that I explain myself. What are we doing today? I asked suddenly, wanting to shift gears. Are you ready to work? Neil waited. I nodded. Okay, let's get to the mat. Interrupt if there's something on your mind, but we've got plenty to do. I loved that Neil didn't push me for explanation, and I truly felt some relief from letting my emotions loose, even for a few minutes. With time, I would learn to grieve each and every loss that accompanied my paralyzed body. But for now, I saw this incident as a regrettable show of emotion. I would park a memory of it in the deep recesses of my mind and strive not to let it happen again. So, can you identify with my stuffing it? Do you do this in your life? I think this type of repression is common. And the emotions that we block by doing it have to come out at some point. It's just a part of our of life. And sometimes they're much worse later. And sometimes we hurt others in the process of trying to stuff what is hurting us. It all seems to go back to the 5 basic emotions: anger, sadness, fear, disgust, and joy. If we stuff our sadness or anger, things can and will manifest later, sometimes with a vengeance. So instead, it's better to work it out at the time of the initial feelings, if that's possible. I realize that there are times where it's not appropriate to let it out and process those feelings right in that moment. But we have to make sure that we're not just continually holding it in and never letting our emotions to be released. When I was in the hospital, I was not good at this. Have you ever had a good cry and then felt so much better? I think we can all say that we have. And this is what happened when I came to the end of myself and I couldn't stuff it anymore. So I want to read this section. It's actually on page 111. And it says this: Barb saw right through me and asked me outright, "Tasha, are you sure you're okay with this? It's all right to admit that this will be hard for you." I snapped right back, "Oh yeah, I'm fine, Barb. This is long overdue." Barb was good. She did not buy my bravado. I had buried more than the fear of life without a boyfriend. "Now, Tasha, how are you really doing? Tell me the truth." My fake smile quickly faded as I realized Barb saw through my pretense. She tore down my front, although I admit it was pretty weak at this point. I felt defenseless, while Barb seemed ready for my collapse. No more stuffing it. My resistance was gone. Tears welled up in my eyes and the flood of defeat broke loose. I was falling, but not 16 feet to the Sheldon Theater floor. This time I was falling apart with no strength left to fight. The emotion I had stuffed for so long would not stop gushing forth for hours. With blurred vision from tears that flowed freely down my face, I motored back to my room where my mom was waiting. "Tasha, what's wrong? What happened?" She looked to Barb for explanation, doubting my ability to speak through heavy sobs. Barb never had a chance to reply. "My life sucks. This is so unfair." I am certain this was the most volume out of my mouth since my last Wizard of Oz rehearsal. "I'm never going to be able to do anything that I want to do. My life is over. I can't believe this is me. Travis and I are going to break up. You guys had to spend all of your life savings on a new house. I'm going to live with you for the rest of my life. I can't believe what has happened to us." This was Mom's cue to start crying. She had been holding it in too. For who stuffs pain better than a mother who would give anything to spare her child from all this disappointment? As much as I love my mom and empathize with her now, at the time I was inconsolable. I continued to cry for almost 15 hours straight. Throughout the night and into the next morning, I cried even as I dozed, although I don't really think I slept. Ironically, when I finally stopped, I felt incredible relief. I had been carrying this grief within me, and when I cried it all out, I felt release from a burden that I cannot quite explain. My situation had not changed overnight. I was exhausted from not sleeping, but suddenly I felt some peace. Yes, my life sucked, to put it as bluntly as any teenager would. But what had changed overnight through the endless tears was the way I dealt with it. I had decided that I would no longer stuff it. It was my life after all, and I felt an odd desire to face it, to complain about it, to cry about it, to mourn the loss of old Tasha's shoe. Oddly, it felt as if old Tasha had melted away with my tears, not like the Wicked Witch of the West, who who melted from a bucket of water. Old Tasha wasn't completely gone, but she had stepped aside for new Tasha to wheel into the spotlight. Her brave performance was over. It was time to take a bow and become the new Tasha Schuh. Not an actress, but a human being with fears and hopes for the future. So there's a few things that I want to point out here. First was my team. When I finally broke down, it was only Barb and my mom. So I didn't do this in front of a lot of people, but they were there for me. Barb, my OT, and my mom both saw that I was trying to hold everything together, but it was getting more and more difficult to do so. Barb loved me enough to ask the hard questions so that I could process what I was feeling instead of holding it in. And so as hard as it was for my mom to see me crying, she stayed with me and she let the tears fall. This also gave her permission to release the emotions that she was holding inside, and it was probably healing for both of us. So it's so important when we're going through these times that we surround ourselves with people. What I've said for years, our pit crew, the people that care about us, that can help us. And that's exactly what Barb and my mom did. They helped me and they were there for me. So please know today that you are not alone. Reach out to a teacher or a counselor, a trusted friend, if there are things that you're going through and you don't know how to process them. Please don't stuff it. Don't do what I did. Which really brings me to my second point. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel the emotions that you are feeling. They were given to us, our emotions, to process what's happening in our lives. I think the best example of emotions being explained is in the movie Inside Out. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a cartoon and animation, but it's really powerful to show how we need all of our emotions, and it's okay to feel them. If you've not seen this movie, I really recommend that you watch it, because our emotions are there for a reason, to be felt and expressed. And I don't know why, as human beings, we have such a hard time crying. We apologize when we cry. A normal emotion, telling others, I'm sorry. But crying and sadness are a part of life and are part of the emotions that we have. And this life can be hard. So let me say it again. It's okay to cry. This is something that I have never been good at. My grandpa died when I was almost 11 years old, and I did not cry one tear at his funeral. I refused. I don't know why, but I just didn't want to cry in front of other people. And so I did not cry until I got in our van all by myself, and I just let it out. And crazy enough, at 11 years old, now I'm an adult, and I did the same thing last weekend at my aunt's funeral. I held in my tears. I refused to look at the picture that they had of her and tried not to look too long at the slideshow, and I just kept holding in my tears. So I did not want to lose it in front of so many people that I had never met. And I was actually shocked that very few people were crying. I mean, it was a celebration of life and there was no service, but I was so surprised that most people were just talking, and obviously it's just an observation, but sadness is often present and we don't see it. And, obviously I couldn't see who was crying on the inside, but those who were brave enough to cry in public, maybe helping others confront rather than stuff our feelings. Now, I was not one of the brave ones. I kept telling myself, just wait till you get into the van. But when I got in the van, I forgot that my dad had ridden with us, and so I was like, wait until I get home. And I stuffed it. I held it in until the evening when I was laying in bed, and I just cried and I let it out. And thankfully, Doug was there to console me and help me process everything. But it made me question why I had felt that I needed to wait to let my feelings out. So this is something that I'm going to work on, and I want you to also. We can do this together. Stuffing it repeatedly, holding your emotions inside over and over again, will not help and does not help. And so find healthy ways to process your emotions. Maybe working out at a gym, swimming, get a punching bag, see a counselor, whatever helps you process and get rid of the negative emotions and helps you move forward in a healthy way. So I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below on this video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel and be sure to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. See you soon.